Okay, so welcome back after the lunch coffee break. And oh, wait, that's service? What is it? Whoa!
Long slot, right?
Yeah. That's Jägermeister, German alcohol. You're a lucky guy, Ange. Right? Yeah, okay. Feel comfortable. Okay. Before I introduce the last talk, just another remark. We will have some closing remarks at 5 p.m. Yeah, all the guys who already visited Troopers in the past, they know it. So please don't go home, to the train, to the plane, whatever. Don't miss the closing remarks at 5 p.m. They will be held here. Okay, so I may introduce the last speaker of the day in the attack track. It's Ange Albertibi, and he's a reverse engineer and also author of Korkami, a tool. Yes. I think, okay, so some introduction by yourself. And he will talk about caring for file formats and why you should think before opening at least unknown files.
Or maybe you should. Sounds works? Yeah, sounds works. So, hello, welcome to my talk. So, if people don't know who I am, I make polyglots, like files with multiple types at the same time, and also schizophrenic files. So, it's this file with one type that behaves differently. So, it was an old presentation of mine where the same file was a PDF for the slides that was showing live, which also a PDF reader. So, basically, to show the sound is okay? It sounds weird from my side, okay. Here you have the example of the file showing itself. So it's a PDF and a PDF reader. Also it was Java and HTML. And if you open the same file in another PDF reader, then you get a completely different document. So that's the kind of file I do. I did a big presentation about many kind of weird examples. I tried to explain file formats with cows, but that didn't really tell why people should care, and that's a bit the goal of this presentation. Other examples, so at the same presentation, it was at the CCC, I made a file that was a JPEG and JAR, and if you encrypt it with AES, you get a PNG. If you decrypt it with TripleDES, you get a PDF. And if you encrypt it with AES with another key, then you get a flash video. So that's the kind of thing I do. I'm also a part of the POC GTFO publication, in which we manipulate a lot of format for good use, and we also abuse file formats. So for Pocket GTFO, we actually manipulate and rely on a lot of tools. And because we manipulate them, we also rely on a lot of tools, external tools for manipulations, and also a lot of custom scripts. I'm also interested in preservation, whether it's hardware of old school games or digital preservation, and I'll be back on that later. So basically, I care about file format in many aspects, just using them in a standard way, abusing them in many artistic ways, and also thinking about their preservation. So yes, I have a lot of different interests. I don't like this interest to mix. So when I'm using file formats, I don't like that they crash my printer, which sometimes happen. In this case, people said you deserved it. But I'm quite concerned about file formats for many aspects. So what is a file format first? And of course, you could say, okay, the way I present them in a binary, you could say it's just a sequence and just this byte of this sequence of bytes and everything. But if you think about it, when you create any kind of tool and then you say, oh, I want people to reuse my data like it's an image, then you will want to export it as PNG, and you will export to PNG so that people can reuse your image. If you have something that looks like fonts, then you want to export it to TTF, for example, and so that you know that other people who just want to use the font that you generated for any reason, then is reusable by others. So basically, for any information, a file format is a way to communicate between two communities. Like you have your physics generator, then you export something so that people can then reuse it further. So it's a computer dialect because it's only limited to a small group of people, but to communicate between communities, right? Digital communities. So it's if you don't think so, then try exporting all your data as XML or as raw, and then you'll see how people react to your whatever you created, right? So a file format is, of course, security, a byte, an exploit, or whatever, a length of something, but at the beginning, it's also something that you rely on transparently. It's sound, then you use this format. It's a picture, then you use this other format, and so on. So it's kind of a standard in the computer community. So whether it's for example, if you take an example of a movie and you have an actor, in the end, we don't care who the actor personality really is. We only care about what they represent, what they are for us from the movie, right? We don't care what's behind. And it's a bit the same with the file formats. You don't really care what's behind, for example, GIF or GIF. We don't even know how to pronounce it. But we just care that it's easy to use and it's everywhere, right? It's not, of course, it's not like GIF is something very important for humanity. It's just that it's fucking easy for everyone to do an animation and something funny on the internet, even though any other format might be able to do that, right? There's no need to be emotional and stay in our comfort zone just to say, let's save GIF, because actually, we don't really care about file formats. We care about what they provide us, right? If they don't provide us something easy to communicate between communities, then this is not the file format you're looking for, right? It doesn't care about its name or its internal. Sometimes it's also good to think this way, right? This is why people still use GIF or obsolete file formats, as we'll cover a few. So here, why should InfoSec care? Because after all, you fuzz file formats. You can blame bad devs all you want. Then you collect CVs and you're a star and you have media attention, logo, website, stickers. And solved anything? Well, no, but at least you can make a living out of that. But in the end, nothing was improved, right? So first problem is the attack surface. And Hanno asked that earlier. I mean, it's really a problem, right? How many supported file formats are inside the standard OS these days? I have no idea, and it's probably way too many. Now, for each file format that is supported, how many parsers are located in places where we don't expect them? And then for each parsers, maybe this parser depends on which version, because sometimes we cannot update all the deprecated versions of parsers. So even if we find CVEs, and vulnerabilities, then maybe this version will not be updated. And sometimes the problem, the InfoSec problem, also comes from specifically the compiler. So a lot of problems stack up regarding the problems of file format for InfoSec. For example, I did a few small posters about the PGM, PPM file format. So they are very trivial file formats, but for sure, the easiest way to turn any binary data into a grayscale or a RGB picture. And yet, many people didn't know about it, and they didn't know that many tools on their system were supporting that out of the box. So it really shows that if it was already there, they probably never used it until now. They probably didn't care. But suddenly, if you have a need to turn data into image quickly, it's the best way, and then you need it. But until that, you just thought it was an image, and maybe you'd never used it anyway, so it didn't really need to be in your OS in the first place, and to increase your attack surface. So we should reduce the attack surface, and this is an example from Cant Fix. I don't know how to say, I just say his name as the French one, where he saw that the strings command line tool was actually parsing files, and it could be exploited. So running strings on a binary file could lead you to be exploited. And this was certainly unexpected, that even when you look for strings in a binary blob, that suddenly there's a parser where you didn't expect it. So how many supported and unsupported formats and subformats? I don't know. And if you have some accurate information, not just the standard stuff you find on Wikipedia or anything, then I think it's something worth studying. So how many, and also, it might depend on your OS, but once it's standard, it's supported by all the browsers, then it's also an, how do you say, attack surface for all users, right? Everybody is on the internet. If you have a file format that is unknowingly supported by all browsers, then you maybe have a perfect attack surface for everybody, and yet you may not be aware of it. And how many do we really need? I think it's important when you think about embedded device, where instead suddenly you have limitation of space, and there's no way you would support some. If it's a sound device, then okay, with the Internet of Things and Linux everywhere, maybe it's wrong nowadays, but it could be that you're limited, and in this case, you will actually care about which file formats are supported. So I think that because we capacity in terms of computer capacity, computing, storage, memory, we keep stacking formats and features, and that doesn't solve anything. It's not limited to InfoSec. It's not limited to digital preservation. It's a problem everywhere, and this just goes worse. So a bit what everybody says, but I think it's also worth highlighting for specifically for the file formats. So let's take a small break. Proof of concept break, and have a look at POC GTFO 10. So in one of the articles was called Pokemon Plays Twitch, in which there was this game, Pokemon Red, which was exploited just via input, so not via any memory manipulation, just via the controller and the reset button. Then the game was exploited. The Super Game Boy was exploited. Then it takes over the control of the Super Nintendo. So it's an exploit just via joystick of the whole series of architecture. So this is a big article in this issue that describes it, right? And what is better is that the file itself is a polyglot, and the file itself can be used to exploit the actual hardware, for example, or an emulator. So here you just have an emulator, you feed it directly Poker GTFO 10, and it exploits the series of architecture, and the final payload is to display the article. So proof of concept of Poker GTFO 10 is a POCception. It's an article describing exploits. This file is also performing exploit to display the article. Now let's go back. These are hackers that you probably don't know. They were a bit young, but it's true that we don't care who they were at this time, right? Young celebs, what they were supposed to be when they were younger doesn't really matter, right? So it's a bit the same for the file format. What the specs was defining, we don't care. It's now the reality that matters. And security cares only about reality, not the theory that was originally, oh, my son will be an astronaut and a politician. Yeah, right, now he's a hacker and presenting at troopers, or something like this. So security and a lot of other words like digital preservation don't care about obsolete theory or religious texts or this kind of thing. Just care about the current reality, a bit like the picture of you when you were very young. So we can blame parsers, but what about the file format at the origin, right? If the map that you are given to define a file format was unclear, you'll get lost anyway. If the map is shitty, then you'll get lost. So if the specs were bad, if the blurry file format, if the file format is blurry, then you will never have a clean parser. And on top of that, even this part is quite useless in the end. So when you want to manipulate file formats, you have two possibilities. You either use a library that to import, export, so a ready-made translator, or you write your own, and in this case, you depend on the specs. Which leads to the problem of file format landscape. So let's take real examples. So in the past, I worked on exploiting hash collision, and for that, I abused the JPEG file format. And the JPEG file format is kind of, libjpeg is used everywhere. So to abuse JPEG everywhere, you just need to abuse libjpeg. And for that, you can just read the source. And as soon as you have found a way, so this is one of my other presentation, as soon as you have found a way to abuse libjpeg, then you abuse JPEG everywhere. So in practice, JPEG that you have on your computer is libjpeg turbo vis6. It's the standard everywhere. Even the later version, version 6, is not, version 7 is not backward compatible, so people don't use it. So de facto, the standard JPEG format is actually libjpeg turbo 6. So even if you would create your own JPEG library, you want everybody else to be able to open your JPEG and to manipulate them. So basically, you would have to adapt to what libjpeg actually is. And it turns out there are discrepancies, which you can exploit to do stuff that was not so planned. Even though it's perfectly standard, it doesn't trigger any error, and it just works everywhere. On the other hand, for each main PDF reader, I created a set of PDF files that would only work, that would perfectly work out of the box on each version. So I created different files for each PDF reader, and they open all perfectly on each of the reader they are supposed to work. And they all fail on the other readers. So it's like 1 versus 5, and they perfectly work. I made them so that they always work out of the box for each, one set for each. But on the other hand, they fail on all the others. So in this case, we have 6 interpretations of the specs. So now the specs, I mean, of course, it's extreme examples, as you can imagine, but what are the specs worth? They are worth like, it's just nice theory, right? It doesn't represent any of this reality. And the problem, another problem is that when you say when you report a bug of this kind of discrepancy, it's not a security bug, right? Then people don't care because no one was pwned and the CNN won't care. The problem is that this shows the complexity. This shows the difficulty of the attack surface. If you wanted to secure all of this, it multiplies the problem. If you have no way to know what the PDF is made of, then you have no way to fix in the right way. So it still concerns InfoSec in general. So if you have the case of libjpeg, then with one good open library, then at least you have a unified attack surface. You could say that, OK, now that you find one bug in libjpeg, then you can pwn everyone. But on the other hand, once this bug is fixed, and if people can update it, then it's fixed for everyone. So diversity is really good, where we're all supposed to use the same file format. So it's difficult, right? Do you want to have good file formats, reliable file formats in the end? Or you want just diversity so that, like this, you just hope you won't be pwned because the attacker was specifically aiming at another reader that you don't use. You know, like, phew, I didn't die, so it's fine. Someone else had something broke, someone was killed, but it wasn't me, so phew, I'm fine. Instead of, let's try to solve the problem for everyone. So diversity is good, yes. It creates a lot of unofficial PDF substandard, which you can play with and create schizophrenia and abuse HR and anything else. In any case, in both cases, even the case of libjpeg, the specs are just an introduction guide for dummies, you know, like when you want to learn the basics. But it doesn't represent anything realistic anymore. So I think at least providing a free set, it's important because we'll see later digital preservation, for example, doesn't want to rely, or sometimes we cannot rely on files that you download by accident. I mean, yeah, you see what I mean. And so a good free set of examples with corner cases is a very good way first to define a file format in reality, and if possible a grammar, even though that's a bit too theoretical for me, and I'm not sure it's always possible, especially in the case of PDF. From the digital preservation perspective, the PDF future is actually getting worse. So now they are defining the PDF-E for engineer, which introduced some 3D elements. The PDF-A, so specific, a subset that is specific to archiving, so what institutions will use to an HR department or finance department will use for archiving already has 8 substandards. So even PDF-A, which was supposed to be the solution, already has 8 different flavors. Now, the latest the latest specs that you can download for free are like from 2007. The specs are now commercial. The main implementation, as always, Adobe Reader is not open, and there's no set of free file, I mean, at least from an official source, from Adobe and so on. And you think that we preserve information with that, and we want to protect our users against threat against that. So we were just waiting for a new disaster, in my opinion. Many file formats are abandoned. So as I said, the specs are just theoretical writings at the beginning, but nothing happened. And it's, again, it's like knowing someone only from the picture when they were babies. Another proof, another POC pose. Proof of concept GTFO 11. So it will be out tomorrow if the QA goes through, which Philip is busy at, I hope. So, I mean, you've already seen it here in Troopers, the printed version. So it's also a Ruby web server. So the file can serve itself. So POC-GTFO has no official mirrors. So now each issue can be its own mirror. But it's also displaying, this is what happens, and this is the page that is displayed. So it displays its own web page. And then it's also, you remember every issue is also a zip, Polyglot, PDF and zip. And it parses its own zip to display the information about its zip so that it can serve independently each of its archived documents inside. So I think it's now self-aware. It's a PDF that parses itself, so HTTP quine, and on top of that, parses itself to serve its internal in case you want them. So now we have one potential mirror per issue. And we even used it for real. Like we set a server live just to see if it works. And of course, it works. I mean, QA was quite difficult, to say the least. But yeah, it works. So another important question, so I want your attention. Do you still sleep with a teddy bear? Who raise your hand? A few, OK. So when you're a kid, you sleep with a teddy bear, probably. But then when you're older, it's like, no way I would sleep. I evolved. I'm not a kid anymore. While, as I said again, now we keep stacking stuff on our computers. So the more and more features, more and more file formats, the attack surface just keep growing. But we still have file formats that are like could be considered obsolete. And the problem is that they're obsolete. We could have get rid of them, and we still rely on them. So for example, the weird structure in zip, which enables to create a lot of schizophrenia, to enable the master key bug in Android, made it possible, is, for example, the complexity of zip is coming from the fact that it supports multi-volume or spanning over multiple floppies. You know the save icon. So this is not a feature that I think we use a lot nowadays, yet it's still there. I mean, it's fine. Yeah, I mean, it's fine. But if you think that you have to explain that now to your kids, it's like, yeah, it's still there, and so on. So why don't we want to get rid of it? Like, we got rid of our teddy bear, but still we have this floppy stuff, and we have tar, which comes from tape archiving, and we have this very old stuff. OK, we are a bit, computer science is still young, right? And we're a bit fetishist on, oh, like my toys from when I was young. Oh, I'm going to tar this file again, like when I was a 10-year-old or something. So I think the main problem is that it's unclear we can go back, because we'd be too afraid to lose them. And it's, again, the problem of preservation. If we are afraid to go back, if we are afraid to lose the information, then we still want them to be there. And this still keeps the attack surface big. And we cannot focus on newer problems. We still have maybe to fix 20-year-old bug in whatever old obsolete file format that shouldn't be there in the first place. So suddenly you see that being clear for the future of a file format or some kind of data is also preventing us to handle the current problems of the present regarding the attack surface and dealing with the current bugs. So the problem is just growing because we don't read of the past, because we are afraid of losing the access to the data. So yet we deprecate for security, and we do that usually without any second thought. So for example, this was a proof of concept of a JPEG, of a PDF, where the JavaScript here that you have here is actually encoded as an image. So the script that you see here is actually, you can see that it's the same data. So you can see that the same color is the same character in level of gray. Because if you have a grayscale JPEG, then you can make it lossless. And in this way, the script itself, it could be malicious, is stored as an image. That's not against the specs, right? But of course, you would say, hey, it makes no sense that you can store some JavaScript with the JPEG compression, but it works. And it was used for malicious purpose, and it was bypassing security measures. So then what Adobe just did overnight is just prevent JavaScript to be compressed via JPEG, which makes sense, but then it's against the specs. And suddenly, this file wouldn't have its JavaScript supported anymore. And any other data, I could have the page contents, so this text stored as JPEG, and then this page wouldn't display, and my document would be broken. So it sounds like, yeah, it doesn't make sense, so let's kill that feature for security. But it turns out that this is against the official specs, no matter how bad it was in the first place. And remember, the specs didn't evolve. And then we broke backward compatibility for good. And this was just maybe not even a CVE. So we lost track of it, even though we killed backward compatibility in a format that is supposed to be perfect. So once again, for security, we deprecate without any second thought, without even any media attention, and yet we willingly deprecated the specs, even without the specs being updated. So there's no trace to go back now and to see that it's a problem. It's good, it's closing security bugs, but the specs now is on purpose, we broke backward compatibility, yet we still have zip and tar, so it makes you think. We do the same with, we do the same. Now, the same happens for example, for Windows PE format. So now, slowly, from each version of Windows to the next, the file formats parser is getting more strict. But usually it's only deprecating packers which were using very unusual structures for protection purposes, for protection or just compression purposes, not really malicious. So for example, FSG, a very known free but not open source packer, now FSG will not open on modern Windows version because it's using an entry point that is too close, this is before the header. I think that's the reason. I might be unsure, but at least a lot of files that were working in the past now just will stop working. So the so-called compatibility, you know that you have even this DOS stub that says this program cannot run on MS-DOS or whatever. This program, yeah, it's there, and yet a common available PE file that was using a free, clean packer will not work anymore. So where is the limit now? The specs never really updated to cover any of this case. It got stricter. It's the theoretical backward compatibility that we cherish, and we say, oh, we cannot deprecate all the format. Well, it's actually broken. Maybe for security reasons, it's actually good. Maybe for security reasons, but the change is documented nowhere, and a lot of software stopped working suddenly. So if we want to improve InfoSec, if we want to improve security, then where's the middle ground, right? If we say, oh, let's keep tar and zip, and yet let's, how do you say? Let's keep tar and zip because in case, and then some stuff changed for security reasons, maybe, or not even clearly documented, and yet the compatibility is gone. You cannot use stuff anymore, but we have no trace for that. So once again, the attack surface goes bigger, and we don't know. We didn't solve anything, right? It just keeps getting worse. So I mentioned earlier that I went to how do you say, a DigiPres event, so a digital preservation event, and as a representative of InfoSec community, and I was in the middle of people from National Archive, British Library, universities. I was the only one who was in t-shirt, who looks like maybe I had a black hoodie that day. And I was in the middle of academics. It was very warm welcome. And then I was struck how much they believe that PDF is their god, and how much they rely on it. And yet, it was really weird because they rely on something where there's no free specs, there is no way to assert security, there is no way to make sure we can improve the future, regarding security, regarding preservation. And they just rely on expensive software. And so I was invited on purpose as the Grim Reaper, the bringer of bad news. And definitely that was what I did, because they were like, PDF is great, PDF is perfect, PDF is how we do, we save the knowledge of our country. And I came and I say, hi, I come from a different world. This is what I do with the PDF, and I showed them mine. And then I said, just a week before something, Flash was like officially killed from a lot of browsers saying, okay, it's too bad for security, now it will not be supported out of the box. Even though years ago Flash looked like it would be there forever, it's Adobe. Then suddenly we say, for security purposes, we are going to kill your file format. And I didn't give them an ultimatum, but I used that as an example saying, this is what we did with Flash. So if you don't fix PDF, then maybe this is eventually what's going to happen. And even though this person spent their life saving archives for their government or libraries and a lot of knowledge, then they might rely on something that will just be killed for security reasons eventually. And now, many of this stuff is actually scanned books. In this case, it's fine, as long as there's no fire, so that the books still exist. But what about files that are born digital? It's not, once again, directly InfoSec, but if we don't also solve this problem, then the problem of InfoSec is not going to shrink. It's still going to grow, right? So I know I didn't come here with the vulnerabilities and 0 days and everything, although I came with some weird files, but it's definitely a problem that is linked, I think. The problem is still growing. So, the good news, the only good news I have today, is that actually this started like 6 months ago. They started independently, like from Adobe and everything. They started an open source validator. It's not a reader, but it's at least a validator, something that starts to build the rules of the actual PDF. An open source parser. This is called Vera PDF. And I think it just started like 6 months ago. It's quite recent. And even just 1 week ago, they started to release the PDF corpus, which is a set of clean, free files, a lot of them, that enable to actually define the reality of the parser. So that's the only example. I mean, typically, the only set of files that you have is that the result from a fuzzer, a set of files from AFL, or just as soon as you have extreme files from the internet, there's no way to distribute them by taking them illegally, or it would be too time-consuming to actually try to clean them all. So this is a very good example, and I think this is a very good thing to do so that we can redefine this format that was never defined in a clean way from a realistic perspective, right? And also, you can feed your fuzzers with that, so that's because maybe it will explore corner case that you will not see via available documents. And so, again, you can make the parsing of the robustness of your favorite parser better. So it can be used for you to fuzz better. It's also good for us to understand what the file format actually is. So it's very beneficial in a lot of aspects, and I think it's a great initiative. So, as a conclusion, to conclude, it's late. The attack surface is certainly growing, and we have too many formats and subformats, and in the case of when there is no good open library, there are too many parsers out there. The specs shouldn't be a religious text that doesn't evolve and that just becomes outdated and worthless. It should reflect a reality. So I would really like that specs are now something that is pushed on Git, something. The format is on Git, and then when there is a security feature, then they say, okay, we'll have a major version update. We will deprecate this feature. There's a point in time where we say this feature will not be supported, the specs get updated, and the parser, the standard official parsers get updated so that things move forward. We may reduce attack surface, we may understand, but at least there is a trace and then a way to go back so that we can open all the files again in case. So traceability and openness. So a good openly, but on top of that, we already have historical traceability so that we can cleanly cut bugs and know why it's failing, because otherwise it's a mess. Deprecation is a natural cycle, and yet I think it's very rarely happens only for security reasons, and we are not clearly aware of that. No file formats. I mean, PDF, this is a good Vera PDF is a good initiative, but it's not fully preserved. No up-to-date specs and no free test coverage. And let's be negative again. I think it won't happen. We won't do anything until there is a great disaster, and it ends up with a logo and a website and a CNN. So if you have a suggestion for a future logo, I'm all ears. Thanks a lot for these individuals for their suggestions. And if you have any questions.
Thank you very much, Ange. Okay, questions?
No rant? Too late.
I have a note.
Oh no, Sergey.
Right. So, on the subject of parsing PDFs, in the LangSec workshop, in the first LangSec workshop, there was a paper by Andreas Bock and I forgot the second author, I'm really sorry, about how they tried to build a verified parser for PDF.
Yeah, I remember that.
That's right. And instead ended up with a sample that crashed or endlessly looped all renders. This year, our French neighbors, Olivier Levillain and others, are coming up with another attempt at a verified parser. So
Best of luck.
yeah.
For
Well,
which parser?
again, I fully expect this to be an actual overkill in in the way of explaining why the format cannot be parsed. But anyway, you will find the abstract of that paper at the workshop website, lingsec.org.
Thanks, but again, they build their parser from the specs, right? And as we saw, there are like 6 sub-specs that are undocumented anywhere, but they're reality. So yeah.
Hope springs eternal.
Yeah, hello. One question about your polyglot files. So are they dependent on the parser? So would they only work on some of them, or did you try to make them somehow universal?
The POCGTFO, you mean?
Yeah.
We have a very, very harsh QA, and we try to make them open reliably on everything. Which, for example, Adobe has another feature against the specs, where if you have a PDF starting with the magic of, let's say, Windows executable, it will refuse to open. It's not in the specs, but it's a security measure to prevent PE and PDF polyglot. And because of that, there are a lot of file formats that we don't mix because we know it would be blacklisted by Adobe. So it's actually very important for us. And sometimes we also even have very obscure bugs. There's one I can cite with. So we have I think it was when we made ISO and Flash and PDF polyglot. And for some reason, the first image, there's no logical reason, I mean, apparently, for that. The first image on the PDF wasn't displayed anymore, only the first image. And we just found out that at the latest moment, and there was no logical explanation, right? The file should either not load at all, or no image maybe at all, but just the first. So what we quickly did was insert at the top of the file a 1 pixel picture to be sacrificed. But yeah, we have a very complex QA process, and we try that it opens correctly on every browser, and sometimes it's very difficult.
Hey, I can also share a bit about PDF stories. That I think there are basically 4 free software parsers out there, 3 of them in C and 1 in JavaScript, and I fuzzed all 3 C parsers with relatively trivial fuzzing, found issues in all of them. But I find this an interesting question because
security issues or rendering issues?
At least probably security issues.
Okay.
Like often it's difficult to decide what is a security issue, but
okay.
At least crashes and. There's probably no alternative right now for the use cases that these people need. So I kind of understand why archiving person wants to use PDF, because I would not know what to propose instead. And given how much documents are in PDF, I don't think we I think it's probably too late to propose a different format. I mean, also like myself, documents from the past I have archived as PDFs, like letters or whatever, because I have a scanner that can just put the PDF on a USB stick. So yeah, 1, I don't think we have an alternative right now, and 2, I think we probably already have enough PDFs to not be able to deprecate it ever.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. So that's a problem, right? We cannot fix the problem, so we're going to keep relying on it. And now we keep creating new ones, so we're just expanding the problem. While instead of saying, OK, now but we deprecate stuff in other cases, right? Like the money, right? So we can say, OK, now we'll stop using that. It will not be accepted. Exactly, I'd say like Fraktur writing, which is not supposed to be used officially anymore in German documents, even though it was in the past. So archivists know how to read it, but now no one uses it for writing anymore. And actually, I think it's almost forbidden, if I'm correct. So to use it in official documents. So say that, okay, we can handle the past, we can document what is it until that point, and now let's try to start clean again. I mean, or at least to start to have a look and not deprecate from one day to the other. You know the joke, like we'll switch side from one day to the other to drive on the other side of the road just with cars. It will create problems if the truck don't do that the next week. So, so you're right that I don't want to get rid of PDF, but we could say, okay, now we have documented a way to read those past PDF in the future for good. Then we can say now for security reason, we're going to try to do something else instead of having all these parsers that are not documented anywhere. I mean, the specs are not representative. So I think it's still two related problems. And as long as we say, yeah, let's go on with PDF and create new PDF, the problem just keeps growing.
But are you kind of trying to start a project here that we have a different PDF-like document format that's well specified, or do you know if anyone is working on that? Because I mean, that's basically what you're proposing, right?
Yeah.
That we have, for the use case of PDF, we have a well-defined format that can be securely implemented, maybe is designed on LangSig principles, or
no, I have no suggestion.
and a free implementation and all the nice things.
Yeah, no, I have no suggestion, and no, I won't be at least able to implement that for now. I'll just keep on making funny polyglots until I hit the wrong nerve and suddenly there's something major. I think we want, it's just my opinion, but it's not like it's going to change unless the holy sayings of Donald Trump Jr. are lost for eternity, and then CNN will wake up. Or his grandson.
I'm interested what measures are taken to preserve the functionalities of the POC.
Yeah, it's actually a problem. And we are opening a preservation bureau in POC GTF4 so that we update the polyglots of the past so that they're reopenable. Yeah, it's actually, you're right, it shows that it's even our concern. And actually, now I hope our readers are still able to modify the PDF by hand so that they can re-enable some features on something. Because some of the issues of the past where we bypass some security features, like I said, the blacklisting, now the Adobe fixed their filter, and now it's blacklisted, so you can't open it under Adobe Reader anymore. So that's why we have a clause. I still think this clause is live on the paper, that if Adobe you want to blacklist this format, then at least please have the consideration to add an exclusion for us, but they never did so far as I know. No more questions? Yeah.
Hey, you asked about other digital formats. One of the most widespread is EPUB. Did you ever look into exploiting that?
Exploiting?
I just Googled it, and it's like the second most popular after PDF, of course. Yeah. So and there's also a couple of free software, open source implementations that are similar as a standard.
So epub to exploit it? I didn't really try. It's not like I didn't have a Kindle until recently anyway. Yeah, actually there's one feature, it's good that you mentioned this format. EPUB just had a minor update, 3.01, and they broke backward compatibility. So it might be that the future EPUB files are not openable in a new, older device. And maybe that's related to the fact that Kindle had a major update on older device recently. So they decided to not really announce that, okay, we're going to break backward compatibility. It shows that file formats are never a priority, even though it might break support for a lot of devices. No more questions? Thanks for your attention.
Thank you very much, all.